Hello guys, welcome to the last lecture. So this is the end of it, the last of the Mohican. After this, there is no more lecture and then it's final and we are done as a done deal. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about evolution. To me, you guys, it's just pretty much three words: change over time. That's evolution. You might get some fancier definitions somewhere in your textbook or other places, but that is pretty much my definition of evolution. And population, you've heard of Darwin, and Darwin, he came and talked about evolution and he explained it. One big thing that he explained in evolution that prior to him, even from Aristotle, they talked about evolution, change of organisms. They talked about it, speciation, all of that has been around. But one thing that stands out with Darwin, he talked about population. It is the population that evolves, not the individuals. That's the main thing, the difference between Darwin and prior to Darwin. So, and we'll talk about it. Let's go ahead. A population. So what is the definition of a population? A population is an interbreeding group of organisms of one species that occurs in a given area at the same time. Okay, so if you interbreed of the same species and they will have the offsprings, and then that is the population of in an area. Also, you have to add that. So you're talking about definition of population. Synthetic theory of evolution, it is synthetic, it means combined what Darwin said and what Mendel said. That's the next one. Darwin theory and science of genetics. So Mendel and Darwin, they almost at the same time, mid 1800, they proposed their ideas and nobody put them together until 1900, okay, 1910, 1920s. So when scientists put them together and said, wow, this makes sense. What Darwin said and what Mendel said, you put them together, it makes sense. And that's the definition of synthetic theory of evolution. So Darwinism's organisms, there are some 4 or 5 things, nuts and bolts that you should get from Darwinism. Organisms produce offspring similar to themselves, population, okay. Within population, there is variation, and Darwin noticed that. So when you have a brother, your brother is not exactly identical to you. It came from sexual reproduction, okay? And that is an advantage to population, to evolution, to organisms. Sexual reproduction is an advantage. Asexual reproduction is a disadvantage. Okay, and I hope I will talk about that here in a minute. So within a population, there is variation, and survival numbers are small in a population. Of all of the offsprings that are produced, or the egg and sperm are produced, the numbers that survive are very small. Okay, natural selection, survival, withstand environmental pressure. So what Darwin said, if there is a disease comes, if some kind of natural disaster, that's what he was talking about. A predator is a natural disaster, a disease, fires, flood, whatever comes. And then those individuals that withstand that pressure, they can survive. And then of course they, whatever it was, they transmit it to the next generation. That is natural selection. The example that I always use in the lecture is that a tiger starts chasing you guys and it will eat some of us. The tiger will eat some of us, and some of us are able to run away. We are fast enough to run away from the tiger. So those male and female that are faster, they can run away from tiger. They mate, reproduce, and guess what? Most likely, based on Mendel, the offsprings can run faster too. And we've been doing that with our farm animals and crops. So that's another thing Darwin noticed. Population evolves and not individuals, as I talked about it. Here's this diagram of giraffe. Before Darwin, Lamarck, I've heard this story. I don't know if it is true or not. On the day that Lamarck died, Darwin was born. I don't know. I heard it. Somebody, one student told me that. But anyhow, what happens, what Lamarck said when giraffes see food on top of the tree, right here, when these giraffes see food on top of the tree, over a period of time, everybody in evolution agrees over a period of time, their neck gets elongated, and individual giraffes finally reach the top of the tree and eat the food. So individual, what Lamarck said, individual organisms evolve. What Darwin said, you have a population, and some of the organisms in population, because of lack of the food, they die. Some of them survive, and they grow their neck longer and longer over a period of time, same thing, and they reach the food. Okay, so the difference between Lamarck and Darwin was Darwin talking about a population, and Lamarck was, and even people before Lamarck, they were talking about individuals. Okay. So gene pool, the definition of gene pool is total of all of the alleles of all of the genes of all of the individuals in a population. So in a classroom, we have a gene pool. City of Stockton, we have a gene pool. State of California, we have a gene pool. The bigger it becomes, the gene pool becomes bigger. If gene pool does not change, the following must occur. Okay, so imagine City of Stockton. If you do not want the gene pool to change, everybody in Stockton must stay in Stockton, right? Okay, so let's look at it. A mating must be random, of course. And then all alleles must be equally viable, okay? And then population must be large. And then individuals cannot move in and out. I talked about that. And then include the other ones that are listed in here. So the following must occur, so the gene pool of all of the genes, of all of the individuals, all of the organisms in that population stay the same. So another thing about adaptation, what happens, and I will get to homology in a minute. In adaptation, a quick example, tuberculosis at the beginning when the antibiotic came out, they gave tuberculosis to people and they were cured, they were fine. And now you're hearing these resistance to these bacteria, the antibiotic, be careful, you take all of your antibiotic, so there is no resistance. Let's put that in a quick example. If you have a test tube and then there is bacteria in there, right? And then you put antibiotic A on top of them, it will kill all of them, but one of them survives. Okay, and you take that one and transfer it to the next test tube, right? Okay, so this one will grow, all of them will grow, and you give them antibiotic A, same as that one. Will they kill them? No, will not. Okay, so they all die if you give them antibiotic B. Okay, all of these will die. One survives, and then you take that one and you put it in next test tube, right? And you give them antibiotic A and B, it will not die. You give them C, antibiotic C, it will kill all of them, and one of them survive. Okay, and so on and so forth. That is called adaptation. It means the bacteria, the genes of in bacteria, the genes are able to sense the environment and change and adapt to the environment and do not die. Okay, so the other thing that evolution brings up is homology. It means organisms had a common descendant, they had a common ancestor. the same organisms in different, the same organ in different homology. I'm talking about homology. The same organ in different organisms under every variety of form and function. Okay, so vertebrate limbs, and then I will talk about that. The vertebrates limbs are very similar. The wings of a bat and my hand are very similar. The structure of the bones. Okay. So, and then homology gets transmitted to the next generation. Right here, if you look at the hand of a human, this is human hand, and the bat's wing, the bones are pretty much same. I'm not talking about the number, but the shape and so on and so forth. So what I gather, what I can assume correctly, that they had, these organisms had a common ancestor based on homology. Okay. And then also when it comes to classification, phylum, class, genus, order, species that you talked about it, this is the way to classify organisms based on their homology. And nowadays DNA is kicking in. Here's another one. When in the chick, in an egg, they have differential gills, arches, like gills. When we are human embryo, we have these gills when we are in our mother's womb. And then our anus is here. We have a tail after our anus. It's called post-anal tail, same as chicken. So there are similarities between chicken embryo and human embryo. Even though our tail goes away after we are born, chicken tails are reduced to minimally. We have tailbone too, okay? But it's not in our way. And evolutionary wise, that is an advantage, okay? We will not get into that. So that is for homology. What if in an island, two organisms evolved and they both learn how to fly? So if you have mice and you have ant in a island, and this predator comes and eat the ant and eat the mice, okay? Over a period of time, some of these mice, they learn how to fly and they become bat, okay? And the ants learn how to fly and they become mosquito or they become fly. The house fly that you're talking about, okay? Or face fly or horse fly, whatever fly you talk about. They both, the ant and the mouse, totally different. Their structure are different, as you know, but they evolve the same thing. And that is called convergent evolution. Analogous, let's read it together. Analogous features, here it means flying, okay? In dissimilar organisms and mice, analogous traits evolve from same sort of natural selection, from same predator. The predator that was eating mice, it was eating ant. So what happened, the ant and mice over a period of time, they learned how to fly. Convergent evolution does not provide information about ancestry or homology or anything like that. You cannot say the ancestor of mice and ant were same. They had a common ancestor. Okay, similar functions from different ancestors. Wings, similar functions, can fly, but different from different ancestors. The other thing that, you know, Darwin used a lot to come up with his hypothesis, his findings, was fossil records. He looked at a lot of fossil records and nobody can deny those fossil records, they are on Earth. And those organisms that fossil records are similar to, they cannot be found on Earth right now. Those species cannot be found on Earth right now. Dinosaurs is a good example of them, and we have thousands and thousands of species or fossil records that they were saying that these organisms were on Earth at one time. The extinction of species by fossil records, and that is pretty much is macroevolution. when you get to zoology, I'll talk about microevolution and macroevolution. Most mammals were terrestrial, so some kind of natural selection occurred. Whales and dolphins moved from land to water. Some because of some kind of natural selection, you're not sure. Okay, human just evolved very recently, and we came to Mother Earth very recently. We have not been here for a long time. Population and evolution. So these two mathematicians, excuse me, Hardy-Weinberg, they came up with an equation to explain the evolution, the Mendel's laws a little bit better, and their names was Hardy-Weinberg equation. You should know this, and then I will ask some questions during the exam regarding these, and I'll let you know what. Okay, if A is a dominant allele, as you already know, and let's give it the number, 0.80% of population is like that. Let P to be A, and then A is a recessive, and 2% of the population is like that. Okay, 20%, they say 20%, and the small a is equal to Q, and big A is equal to P. So, and of course, 0.8 plus 0.2 is equal to 100% of the population are either having A or A. So P plus Q, as you know, P plus Q is equal to 1. You can write down 1 minus Q is equal to P, or you can write down 1 minus P is equal to Q. So what is probability of capital A, small a, and capital A, small a? Right here, capital A, I gave it that number, right? You remember that? 0.8, there's 2 A's times 64. And then small a as 0.04, okay? And what is capital A, small a, right? It is 0.16, and capital A, small a, capital A is 0.16. You add up all of these together, these four numbers, you add up together is equal to 1. If you don't believe me, you add it up, and you will see it. So, can I say AA is equal to P squared? Remember, I gave them the notions of P. And then small a is Q squared, and capital A plus A, and capital A, capital A equal to 2PQ. And then you put this, all of this together, P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared equal to 1. If you go through this process, you will see that is true. 100% of the population is either capital A, or capital A, or small a. But remember, this one is twice. Okay, and that's what this 2 is, 2PQ. So, having said that, I can use that formula right here, P squared plus Q squared plus 2PQ equal to 1, right? So A squared plus 2A, A squared plus Q squared plus 2 parentheses A small a equal to 1. Okay, so for example, 0.08 and 0.02, and you can put it together. We already talked about that. 0.64, 0.32 plus 0.04 is equal to 1. This can be expressed as a Punnett square. If you would, P, Q, P, Q. The parents are P, Q. This parent is P, Q, right? So the first generations, oh, my squares did not come up. Oops, sorry. So the first one is P squared, PQ, PQ, Q squared, right? We talked about that before. Now let's put numbers in there. Same numbers as you got here. right? These two together. And then 64, right? 32 and 0.04. So application of Hardy-Weinberg, let's say in a population, 9 out of 10,000 people have this disease, sickle cell anemia or cystic fibrosis, some kind of disease, okay? And then remember, the people cannot go out and inside of the population. And the mating is supposed to be random. All of those criteria I gave you before for a gene pool. So what happens, Q square is equal to 0.0009 or AA, and then Q is equal to square root of, right, if you cross that off, that's 1.5 to the power of 1.5 is means square root of this 0.03, and that is equal to Q, right? So I have Q, 1 minus 03 is 97, and that is the P. That has not told me how many percent of the population is a carrier, how many percent are having the disease, and how many percent do not have the disease. We can substitute in the equation P, this equation, P squared plus Q squared plus 2PQ equal to 1, right? So that would be your P square, that would be PQ, 2 of them, and that would be Q square equal to 1. Okay, so if you multiply this, all of it, 0.97 times 03 times 2 is equal to 6. 6% of the population are carriers. So 6% of the population is capital A, small a. They're carrier for the disease. Okay. And of course, you know what carrier means. The parents do not know. They see it in their offsprings. We were carrier for that sickle cell, or we were carrier for cystic fibrosis or color blindness, what happened. Okay. And then the people who are capital A, they are not carrier. They are just normal, healthy. 94% of the population is 94% is normal without even being carrier. And then about 0.6% of the, I'm running it off, as I said, 6%, sorry, not 0.6%, 6% are the carrier. I'm running it off. And then 0.09%, if you would, awesome. 0.09% have the disease in the population. So I talked about Hardy-Weinberg equation, and I gave you one example. You should be able to do this problem during the exam. I will give you numbers that you easily can square root, like 49. Square root of 49 is 7, right? Or 64. Square root of 64 is 8. These are the numbers that I will give you for the exam, and then you should be able to come up with the answers. So total of all of these is 1. 6% versus carrier we talked about. Well, toward the end of semester, I always read this by Mother Teresa. I would like to read it to you guys. Anyway, people are unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. People favor underdogs but follow only top dogs. Fight for underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help but may attack you if you help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have and you'll get kicked in the teeth. give the word the best you have, you got any. All right, guys, you have a good luck in your finals, and if I can do anything, please let me know.